What's going on, you guys? It is JS here, back with another video, and I'm finally doing the very last chapter summary for 1:35 a.m. And today's chapter summary, we are going to be doing the new kid. So I haven't done any videos about this for 3 months now, or a couple months now, and literally I finally was able to read it yesterday, and now I'm going to be doing the video today for you guys, and I'm super duper excited to hear what you guys have to, what you guys have to say about this chapter. But before we get on to it, I want to give this chapter a 3.5 out of 5 stars, honestly. It was good, but at the same time, it's super confusing, and you guys will definitely see why. So let's go ahead and get into it. Yeah, and before I actually do say spoilers, like I said, spoilers are ahead, but if you guys don't want spoilers, basically there's a new kid that comes in town, and they find a golden Freddy, and that's it. And the rumors are true. This chapter is about Golden Freddy. So you guys will see. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the main characters of this story is Devin and Mick, and they have been best friends for a very, very long time. And on this day, they are doing a little presentation for their English class, and Devin is basically doing one about this girl called Heather. And he had a story about her 2 sisters, and he's just doing this so he can get her attention, basically, because he's in love with this girl, and they want to be together. So he's presenting his English project, and it goes I can see why Heather doesn't like this, and basically it's because in the story, one of the girls, I believe Haley, because there's 2 girls involved in this story that Devin's saying, and whenever Haley in the story is pulled out by Hope, literally half her body's gone, and the teacher, Mrs. Patterson, is like, okay, that's enough, go to the principal's office. And Devin just looks at Heather, and she says to him, geez, Devin, that was sick. But he basically thinks it's that was sick as in term oh, that story was so cool. No, basically she's saying that the story was disgusting, and why did you tell it about that. So Devin and Mick made up at a parking lot where they usually meet at, and they are basically discussing about what just happened in the classroom. And Devin was like, yeah, did you see the way she looked at me, and she said that the story was sick, and he was like, that's not, and Mick was like, that's not how she really interpreted it. So she means it's sick as in disgusting, not cool. So pretty much while they're discussing about that, they go to their usual hideout spot, where I'm just gonna say right now, it basically was a abandoned gas station. No one ever goes there. It's just completely gone and everything. So a little backstory on I guess Mick and Devin. They usually get B's and C's at school, but occasionally D's, and they say it's not because they're stupid, it's because they don't really doing school at all. So whenever they get to the abandoned gas station, it's literally completely gone, and they're upset, and Mick is like, oh, our treasures, our beautiful, our treasures that we collected over the years, that they've been to the gas station. And Devin's like, we can just get more treasures, but then and then Mick is like, we don't have a clubhouse anymore, so how in the world are we going to be able to save our treasures in a new clubhouse or something like that. So they basically just sit down on the curb, and they're just chilling and eating the snacks that they got. And Devin's like, okay, I'm gonna figure out a way to get Heather's attention. And Mick is like, I'm not really sure of how you're exactly gonna get her attention, especially after the story you just told it, because if someone says a story, like something like that, then they're really not going to like that person that told the story, especially, Devin saying that, about Heather's little sister. So Devin just like agrees, like, yeah, so Devin just like shrugs it off, it's like whatever, and they continue and they're like, okay, you know what, let's go ahead and see what's, left of our treasures, especially since the gas station is like completely destroyed. So the next day they get to school and they meet this person, like this new boy called Kesley. Now Kesley just moved to the town and his dad is a contractor, and he's pretty much, as it says here in the book, that he's here to head up to that hotel/office complex my dad bid on and didn't get. So Meg asked Kesley if they would want to sit at them at the table, and Kesley accepts the offer. And shockingly, Kesley does end up sitting with, Meg and Devin, which is pretty interesting. And, Meg and Devin and Kesley are now talking to each other, and Heather shows up and talks to him. And then Kesley says to her, it's like, hey, did you find that book that I was talking about? And she said, of course I did, and I'm gonna basically, start it tonight. And then Devin, says hi to Heather, but whenever, he said hi to her, she just like gave him like that nasty look. It's like, why are you talking to me? Like, please leave me alone. And Kesley said, that Heather to him is a pretty girl, and Mick says like, oh yeah, Devin thinks, and then Devin just told him like to stop. So pretty much we can see that Devin might have, is possibly like a little jealous. So we learn of Heather's friend group, and her friends consist of Valerie, Juliet, Gabrielle, and Gabriella's boyfriend Quincy. And then they're pretty much like talking about like horror movies. Heather's basically talking to her friends about, how she just wants to like do stuff behind the camera. And Devin comes up to her and is like, yeah, you should totally like do horror movies. And he just keeps explaining like, why she should do horror movies. And it's just like, you're weird, and just like pushes him away. And he gets like that excitement. It's like, oh my god, she touched me. And he gets like very jittery about that, which is a little weird. And then Devin told his friend Mick of, what happened at the lockers, and Mick is just like, yeah, he's just a doofus. So, they're talking about, what they should have for the brand new clubhouse, and, they're thinking of like having a blanket, a tarp, and, robes, so that way it's like the basic type of, clubhouse that they would need to have. And like they're trying to figure out ways, but Devin's like, okay, he just completely changes the subject, and it's like, okay, I want to see how I can impress Heather. And Mick is like, that's not really a good idea. And he says, like, and I quote, doing something to try to impress someone, my mom says that's when boys make stupid mistakes. Pretty much like, if Devin like says something to Heather, then it's gonna basically make it all ruined pretty much. So, the rest of the conversation, they keep talking about what they want to do at the clubhouse, but at the same time, Devin is trying to, talk about Heather, and it keeps on going for like the rest of the paragraph. So the next day, Kelsey is talking to Mick and Devin, and literally by the looks of it literally looks like Devin is getting jealous that Mick is talking to Kesley and not him, which shows that, we can really see that Devin has like, I guess, bad like jealousy type of things going on. It's like when one minute when someone is talking to Mick and no one's talking to him, he's basically getting jealous of it, and you guys will see like another version of that like later on. So Kelsey asks them, hey, what are you guys doing after school, since I haven't really checked anything out recently. And Mick was like, oh yeah, we had this clubhouse, but it got destroyed, so now we're gonna be looking for a new clubhouse. And Kelsey's like, ooh, I should totally help out with this. And he's like, and Kelsey says, yeah, typically a new, like a best place to hang out is like, old, like abandoned type of buildings, pretty much like what Mick and Devin used for that one gas station, or I think it might have been Mick or Devin that might have said that to Kesley. I'm not entirely sure. I think. Yeah, it was, by the looking of it, it was actually Kesley who did, talk that, or did say that abandoned buildings are best for, hangout spots. So Mick is basically so Kesley is basically saying to them, it's like, yeah, my dad totally, knows a lot about this. He can help me with, getting the supplies that we need, and, he could totally help us out with, making this new clubhouse. So Kesley is in on the idea, and Mick is telling him, it's like, okay, yeah, meet us at the flagpole after school, and then, we can go ahead and get the supplies. So basically the next day, Mick, he can't even control his excitement, but what this got me really interested in was this one, I guess, paragraph right here. Hold on, let me read it to you. Today, Mr. Gentry said, we're talking about justice. He peered over his black thick-rimmed reading glasses, which generally hung on the end of his beaky nose. Mick thought Mr. Gentry looked like a little like an eagle. He had white hair and he usually wore brown. He had close-set eyes like Devin did, and then there was that nose. What is justice? Mr. Gentry asked. No one raised their hands. I know a rhetorical question when I hear one, Mick thought. Every culture has its own concept of justice, Mr. Gentry continued. This concept is generally derived from many fields of study. Our system for justice, for example, comes from ethics, rational thought, the law, religion, and just general ideas about fairness. Underlying all of that, though, is usually some kind of gut feeling. Justice is, in most cases, intuitive. We know it when we feel it. He looked over the class. So what does justice mean to you? This wasn't a rhetorical question. Mick didn't even think about raising his hand, though. Raising his hand in class would require that he have a brain transplant or maybe get possessed by or infected by an alien symbiote. Kesley raised his hand and said, justice balances the scales. What does that mean? Mr. Gentry asked. It removes the downside so the downside can't weigh the upside. Interesting perspective, Mr. Gentry said. Heather raised her hand. Mick frowned. Heather. What is about Heather that fascinated Devin so much? Sure, she was pretty, but she seemed pretty shallow to Mick, and that wasn't that pretty. There wasn't more prettier girls in the class. He thought Devin was a little crazy about Heather, though Devin seemed a little scrambled in general. Mick was beginning to think maybe Devin had picked up a symbiont. There was something in his eye, something not quite right. I think justice is payback, Heather said. Payback, yes, Mr. Gentry repeated. Yes, Heather said, like someone disses you, so you have to diss them back. Payback seems a little vague, Mr. Gentry said. Perhaps it's too open to interpretation. What if payback goes too far? Heather shrugged. Accidents happen, she laughed, and then the class laughed with her. Devin laughed the loudest. Mick noticed Kesley wasn't laughing. Mick wasn't laughing either. A shiver slithered down his spine. So that's going to be very interesting until, later part of the book. So keep that whole entire thing what I read in mind. So they all meet up at the pole a couple hours later, and they're like, yeah, we're ready and all that. So his dad comes up, just talks to them. They're just, talking, and okay. So Kesley is introducing Mick and Devin to his dad, and as soon as Kesley's dad's like, okay, how about, and then Heather just cuts them off. And Heather asks Kesley, it's like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? And Kesley asks, oh, we're gonna transform like an abandoned area into like a clubhouse. She's like, oh, okay, I love DIY. So they all fight away for literally all of them, for Heather's two friends plus one of her friends' boyfriend. They're trying to figure out who will go in the truck, but Heather, or I think one of the girls, is like, oh, let's just put the boys in the back. But Kesley's dad's like, okay, no, that's against the law. So they're trying to figure everything out. So Kesley is like, okay, how about the girls, stay here, and the other boys just, or no, how about the girls, come with us and the boys just stay. So that happens, and Devin is very mad at Kesley because, one, he's jealous that he's talking to her, and two, they pretty much just like abandon them just for, Heather. So they just decide to leave, and they just don't want to discuss it about it anymore. So I believe the next day, Mick and Devin go out to, the river and like the waterfalls, see, or in Devin's case, wants to like help Heather pick out like the ideas for filming places. But then Devin tells to Mick, it's like, hey, I found an abandoned place. So after school on Monday, I'm gonna take you there. And Mick is like, hey, why not today? And he said, and all he basically says is like, it's not too far. And Mick is like very confused about like, why can we not go today? You know. So Devin is talking to Kesley and Mick, and they're like, okay, you know, tonight we're gonna go to this one place, and we're gonna meet up, and basically it's like not too far, and they, you know, they agree they want to go. So eventually they get to the area of where this location that Devin was talking about, and basically whenever they get there, Kesley and Mick is like, oh, this is interesting, and this is what the building, you know, looks like from the outside. Hunkered in the woods in front of him, a big, low-slung building with a shallow roof line and small boarded-up windows clung barely to life. Although the building was intact, it sagged and leaned, like it was getting too tired to stay standing. Because a bubble-shaped, filthy but unbroken skylight bulged from the middle of the top of the building, it looked like it wore a bowler hat. It was hard to tell what color the building had been when it was built. Now it was mostly green and black, streaked with mold, mildew, and moss. It was also being consumed by wild blackberry bushes. Aggressive prickly remnants of the vines flanked on the building on the sides. The boys can see from where they stood. The vines grew long, barely reaching the bottom of the building's few windows, but they were thick, compacted together in a barrier that would demand a blood sacrifice to get past. And then this is the part wherever I figured out what building this was. Devin gestured at the wall they were passing. An old faded sign hung askew from under the weather-worn eaves. The sign was so faded you can only make out a Faz and a P, but next to the letters an image of something round to find the elements. Faz P? Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So Mick asks Devin's like, wait, this is pizza, and then Devin's basically it's like saying, yeah, this is basically like an old pizzeria. So eventually they try to find a way inside the building, and eventually they do by going through a window. And then Kesley asks, is that a chicken? Which is referring to Chica, and then Mick asks, you know, if I had a cupcake, which, like I said, it does literally refer to it being as Chica. And then it also confirms that, I'm just gonna say right now that it also has a rabbit and a bear, as well as Pirate's Cove, which does confirm that this was a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, since, you know, it has Chica, Freddy, Bonnie, and Foxy. So eventually they get to the storage area, which is where, you know, Devin is wanting them to, you know, to see. And basically, it's literally described as this. Headless animals hung on long rods that lined two walls of the room. Well, okay, not actually headless animals, but headless animal suits. The suits were dingy and dusty. Some were dark with mildew. They all looked stiff and ragged and ratty with fur missing in places. On the opposite side, 3 rows of shelves held animal heads, bears and rabbits, and birds and dogs. Which, honestly, that got me thinking of the fake teaser Sparky, I'm pretty sure. But it also got me to think of Fetch, you know, from the second book. Every head looked a little battered, like it had been used as a bowling ball or something, but the eyes were in place in all of them. They all stared straight ahead like they were lined up for a roll call. So that's like basically a little description of what, you know, the storage would have. And it also has, like, you know, bins of nails, screws, brackets, and wires. And what they see, I believe, in one of the corners. Listen to this. Kelsey reached for an arm of the human-sized yellow bear standing in front of them. Devin knew what he discovered. The arm was heavy. This wasn't just a furry suit like the ones hanging on the rods. This suit it's an animatronic suit, Kesley said. It has animatronic abilities, I guess, but it can be worn like a costume. So this is a yellow human-sized bear, Golden Freddy. It's literally Golden Freddy, which basically makes all the rumors about this specific chapter true, and it has the functions of basically a springed lock suit. So they're pretty much saying, oh yeah, this could be like, you know, this animatronic like spring lock suit can be, you know, part of our hangout. And I think it's either Mick or Devin that asks this. They're like, hey, where's Kesley? And then Kesley said, oh, I'm in here. And Kesley is inside of the Golden Freddy suit. So, Kelsey, he's dancing around in the suit, and all of a sudden, a snapping noise happened. And basically the spring locked, like, literally closed in on Kesley. Like, droplets of blood, was coming out everywhere, and basically this assumed that, Kesley was dead, pretty much. And Devin was like, okay, this is what I wanted to do. He wanted Kesley to be trapped inside the suit, but he didn't, want Kesley to, be crushed like that. And he even assumes himself that he was both angry and jealous at Kesley, for talking to Heather. And that's basically why, Devin had, Kesley come here in the first place. So Mick and Devin are trying to figure out, okay, how are we gonna get him out of here? And Mick is like, okay, he's flinching, so he must be still alive. And Devin's like, and then this is what I remember telling you guys that to remember about, the justice part. This is what I was talking about, from Devin's perspective. He could see her in the red sweater, and he could hear her tingly voice. I think justice is payback. Payback. This is what he'd intended to do. He wanted justice. Payback. Kesley had hurt him. He made Devin feel like he might be part of something, and then he threw Devin away. It stung, like being stabbed with a sharp object. So basically, it literally sounding of that, literally intended for Devin to do this. Literally to Kesley, because he was so jealous of him talking to Heather that he wanted payback for, Kesley talking to her. So Mick and Devin are still arguing. It's like, okay, how are we gonna get him out of here? Is he even still alive? It goes like that. It goes on like that for like a couple of pages, but then they're like, okay, you know what? Just grab our backpacks, so we're gonna leave, and we're gonna solve everything so we can get Kesley out of there. It even became noticeable, like in the next days, like whenever they went to school, that Kesley was missing. They had literally they had the police involved because they had because they suggested that Kesley was missing, and that he ran away from home. So Devin goes over to Mick's house because Mick claimed to be sick because of the whole thing that they need to talk about. With Kesley. So they, discuss okay, Devin's saying to Mick, it's like, okay, if I'm not at school this day, then, he has a plan that he wants to go over to, the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, get Kesley out of there, and if he doesn't come back, by that Monday, he'll have Mick tell him, or tell the teachers that, he wasn't at school. So basically, they advise that, or they tell each other that. Devin's like, okay, please do what I asked, like what I said earlier. If I'm not back by Monday, tell the teachers that, I'm sick, and, Mick agrees to that. So he goes back to the Freddy Fazbear's location, and he goes to find, the Golden Freddy outfit, the Golden Freddy costume, and, he's checking everywhere. It's basically empty on the inside. He thinks Kesley is there, but the suit feels empty on the inside. So he continues to search around, in the Golden Freddy outfit, in the Golden Freddy costume, and then his hand literally gets stuck inside of the mouth of the Golden Freddy, and his arm is and pretty much whenever the mouth, clamped onto his arm, it basically broke Devin's bone. His arm is completely damaged from the bite. He's literally doing everything he can to, make sure his arm, gets loose of, the mouth. He's, he's pushing it. He's trying to undo the hinges, but it opens for a little bit, then it closes back, and literally the head of the Golden Freddy is getting it closer and closer. Pretty much think of the bite, Golden Freddy's teeth. Think of it, it's right here pretty much. So he keeps trying to move, but then he feels something on his hands. Okay, this is odd, and it's he's feeling bugs, but he's no, it's not bugs. But where's Kesley and all that. But yeah, every time he tried to get himself free, the mouth was coming closer, and pretty much in here it was literally clamped onto his shoulder. Pretty much the mouth was literally right here. But then he got a glimpse inside the suit, and let me read this to you guys. He gasped, and for a moment, shock blind blocked his pain. Download past his arm. Devin could see a body, a dead body, just like he thought he'd find when he came back here to check. But it wasn't exactly like he thought he'd find. The body he thought he'd find didn't have blonde hair. This one had curly black hair. The body in the suit wasn't Kesley. Devin only had a second to try and make sense of this before his shoulder was stuck into the suit. Devin screamed, but no one heard him. And then, so Kesley wasn't inside the suit, but then listen to this. On Monday morning, Mick was disappointed when Devin didn't meet Mick to walk to school. Mick hoped he'd find Devin waiting for him at the lockers, waiting to tell him Kesley was going to be okay, or even waiting to tell him Kesley was dead. This wasn't good, but it would be better than the way they left things last week. Not knowing whether Kesley was dead, was like being eaten alive, like getting digested by that creep-style bounce house in the story Devin read in English class a couple weeks ago. Was that just a couple weeks ago? Speaking of English class, Mick was supposed to read a poem out loud today. Remember that made his stomach churn. It twisted up his insides so much he didn't worry too much about Devin not being at school. Devin had told him it might make a while to get Kesley well enough to move him. Something about that seemed... Someone bumped into Mick, and he dropped his backpack. He bent over, picked it up, and went to class. In English class, Mick was reading the poem over and over while Mrs. Patterson did roll call. He was so into it when he jumped when Mrs. Patterson called out Mick. Here? Yes, I know you're here. I asked you if you know where our budding horror writer is. Huh? Devin? Where's Devin? Oh, sorry, he's home sick. Okay. Mick smiled. He'd done his part. In it together for as long as it takes, which in it together has been like this quote for, ever, like throughout this whole entire book since, they've been close friends. They're like, no matter what they do, they're in it together, and it repeats like throughout the whole chapter. Kesley leaned against a column on the rotunda of his new school. He watched the other kids and smiled or nodded at everyone who passed him saying hey when someone said hello. His gaze kept returning to a couple of boys who lingered outside the front doors of the school. One of the boys wore all black, the other wore ragged jeans and a faded t-shirt. The other kids coming into the school ignored the boys or gave them scathing looks. Both boys occasionally snickered at the passing kids. Kesley pushed off from the column and strolled toward the boys as they finally sauntered into the school. He stepped in front of them and said, "Hey, I'm Kesley. I'm new here." Both boys eyed him, brows raised. He gave them a big, friendly grin. So Kesley said, "Any cool places to hang around here?" And that's the end of the chapter. See, that's what left me confusing. One, how is Devin, is Devin dead, first of all? And, how did Kesley get out of the suit? I mean, it kind of makes sense that, Kesley, is like a ninth grader. It did say in the book that they were like ninth graders, and it's like, how in the world were they able to get out? Was he that small? I'm not entirely sure, but it's just so confusing in a way, but yeah, it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. And also when they talked about, the black curly hair and everything, it got me thinking of Cassidy, who is the other spirit for Golden Freddy, but I'm not entirely sure. But we still have to read the secret chapter of this book, which I will get to for tomorrow's video, so keep an eye out for that. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you guys, make sure that thumbs up button, make sure to subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.